Okay, here's the Zagzebski value problem question. So this is, I think, a nice essay topic. Lots of kind of interesting directions to go on this one. I think even if you just kind of like set out like what the author's talking about for a little bit, you end up in a pretty interesting space because Zagzebski just talks about interesting stuff. She's good. Um, let's see. Yeah, all right, let's just get right into it. This is what I was going to say. This is actually a old problem. We talked about this in class. That's kind of classically known as the Meno problem, and that was from Plato's famous dialogue, the Meno. Like 2,400 years ago, something like that. And at the very end of that long dialogue, where they're mostly talking about knowledge and virtue, there's kind of very, very first intimation towards the forms and implicit knowledge and stuff. At the very end, Socrates poses this question, what is it, Meno, that makes knowledge of the road to Larissa more valuable than a mere true opinion of the road to Larissa? The latter might be something just like a set of directions of the road to Larissa that you hold in your hands. The former would be just knowing how to get there in your mind. So if you know how to get there, that's different from just having a true set of directions, let's call it. So what's the extra value of knowing it as opposed to merely having the right answers, we could say? I think that's a kind of intuitively recognized difference. And we can see that really in education, what we're doing, is that we want to see how people get to correct answers, not just that they get to correct answers, but that they're demonstrating some kind of understanding or knowledge in the process. And we can really show that they know the right answer, not just that they happened upon or whatever they got the correct answer or true belief. And I think there's lots of ways that we can see kind of like conversational norms in the way that we talk to each other as embodying that, you might even say kind of prejudice in favor of knowing and over just having true information, knowing what you're talking about, something like that. So, drawing upon that, Socrates asks that question. Zagzebski has reintroduced that age-old question into contemporary epistemology, um, in particular against a theory called reliabilism from Alvin Goldman, and in large part kind of at Sosa style virtue epistemology, but really as a kind of a general question that epistemologists need to address in order to show a fully adequate theory of knowledge. In addition to, say, the Gettier problem, you also need to be able to solve the value problem. So we're going to use that as basically a criterion of adequacy for any epistemologist's proposal for the right necessary and sufficient conditions for knowledge. That, okay, you got to solve the Gettier problem, but so too must you solve the value problem. In other words, so too must you be able to show that on your account, as you've defined it, there's some additional value that we can say knowledge holds that a mere true belief that falls short of knowledge wouldn't itself possess. Otherwise, you haven't really shown the extra value of knowledge, and that kind of is a way of showing you haven't really shown what separates knowledge from a merely true belief. I mean, everybody pretty much agrees that what we're trying to explain is this thing, knowledge, and that's not just a true belief. Otherwise, we'd be talking about, well, true belief, right? Not knowledge. And the whole discussion in epistemology has been knowledge. So clearly there's something different. Shouldn't you be able to explain what makes the difference in terms of their value? Yeah, that's a pretty good demand, really. So that's all kind of like setting out the problem. And then Zagzebski kind of goes into proposed solutions. So she's got a pretty complex discussion of that. She spends a lot of time discussing how far the challenge extends, and then kind of like maybe midway in the paper kind of starts looking at solutions of her own. Um, so what else to say here? Let me actually say this. If you wanted to kind of add a little something to this that is good for lots of reasons, But it also just shows, I guess I'm going to use the Sosa thing, a certain kind of skillfulness or adroitness in just being able to do philosophical analysis is this. If you were to kind of add, it's like a paragraph or even two, one reason why the value problem that Zagzebski raises is important is it, see, it probably allows us to identify the same thing that will solve the Gettier problem. For this reason, the Gettier problem is a problem of epistemic luck if the very thing that makes knowledge more valuable than merely true belief also shows that that state knowledge can't be had by luck, then we seem to have a solution to both the value problem and the Gettier problem. And that everybody would, I think, recognize as being a big deal. So there really could be quite a lot on the line in this debate and kind of looking at the value problem. So I don't want to say you have to introduce that, but that could be a nice way of kind of showing what we call like, maybe like a value-added explanation. There's a more technical term for this of an explication that involves explaining something, but then kind of really bringing in a lot of things to that explanation yourself without changing what you're explaining. You haven't stopped explaining this, but you're bringing in all these other things to the general explanation of this idea, presumably for setting up the next part of the essay or the next stage of the analysis. Okay, so not necessary, but I think good to kind of get into this either way, is kind of having that in mind. So, how does Zagzebski appear to require a necessary connection between moral value and everything? Yes, so it's kind of a long-winded way of saying this. Zagzebski is, I guess, both famous and infamous for arguing that the only way to really solve the value problem, and thus probably the Gettier problem, is to rely on moral value at some level. You're going to have to kind of bottom out in explaining epistemic value in terms of moral value. She then argues, and this is what people are like, whoa, it's getting radical. She says that what that means is that this whole field called epistemology really turns out to be a subset of inquiry in ethics. How truth and falsity is kind of ultimately grounded in the value of moral values. And that's a kind of a radical position, at least for what you might call conservatives, who want to keep epistemology as epistemology, which is recognized as one of the four main divisions in philosophy, period. So she gets to that conclusion in part through what she calls the problem of trivially true knowledge, trivially true beliefs. True beliefs and knowledge that is of let's say how many grains of sand are in a given handful of sand, where there's no special reason why that would matter, or why you would think about it. It's something you could know. Would we really say that having knowledge of that has greater value than having a merely true belief in that? So we can kind of just give you the truth on that without you coming to know it. Is there any greater value of coming to know it through some kind of difficult process or something? So how are we going to explain the value of that kind of truth seeking? Why does seeking truth and even getting truth, and even in a kind of systematic way, matter if the truths that you're getting don't matter? So what's the value problem that I kind of do there? So she says, there's a kind of moral importance to truth, and that matters in moral virtue, and epistemic value is going to have to borrow from moral value at this most fundamental level. It's not a kind of small borrowing. It's kind of being grounded in. Say epistemic value is grounded in moral value, on her view, and that's how she ultimately solves the value problem in the face of this problem of like trivially true beliefs. Um, so she ends up in a pretty kind of like substantive position in her full solution to the value problem. She's got kind of an easier solution in her definition of intellectual virtue um, from the role that virtuous motivations play. And she's well known for that. That seems like a kind of easy, less radical way of solving the value problem. And she writes a lot on this too. Because let's say that she says having a virtuous motivation is, as she defines it, having some form of the love for truth, which could be a desire for truth. It could be wanting justified beliefs, valuing justification, valuing having a rational belief. All of that's kind of truth-related concern, and that kind of motivation, truth-based motivation, epistemic motivation, is good. And this is getting to the value problem, because truth is good. And if truth is good, then loving truth is good. That's her little formula. And loving truth is necessary for knowledge. Loving truth isn't necessary for a merely true belief. So we've got kind of a really clear, easy way of identifying, just in the kind of with the motive necessary for virtue, what provides the extra value of knowledge compared to a merely true belief. Because a merely true belief doesn't require the manifestation of intellectual virtue, knowledge does. And that's what separates the two. That turns out to kind of give us a pretty easy answer to what makes the one better than the other, is that additional motive that comes from getting to the truth because of your concern, regard, and respect for it. And the processes that lead you to it are kind of processes motivated by that concern for truth. All right, so that's kind of like the kind of two different routes that she takes in addressing the value problem. So in the end, here I'm just kind of saying, like, locate yourself, I guess, somewhere in terms of like, do you believe you're this or that? At the very end, I'm not really grading you on that. I think really just what I want to see you doing at this point is kind of wrapping up whatever your analytical responses are all throughout, and just bringing that to some kind of close. And again, that doesn't have to be a kind of a grand conclusion. It just really, what is the analysis of these ideas warrant as an outcome, whatever it is. So really what I'm looking for you to do here is to kind of do that in a philosophically analytical way. And that's going to include kind of a sense of being philosophically responsible, more so than being grand. Right? I want to get in there and kind of really use acute, fine-grained kind of reasoning throughout, and being careful such that the whole structure is solid and sound, not that it's grand. And there's always time to develop our grander ideas in other avenues. Yes, so it's not to speak against grand ideas in any ways. All right, so that'll do it for this.